Thank you. And I see my thumbs up. Wonderful. Brachim habayim, blessings and welcome. I'm Rabbi Ruth Zlotnick. I am the senior rabbi of Temple Beth Am. And it is our custom here at Temple Beth Am, whenever we're gathered to talk about sacred things, to say a blessing. And so I'll share the blessing that we say at times like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav b'tzivanu b'tzorchei tzibor. We praise you, Holy One, who has brought us together this evening to fulfill the sacred obligations that we have as being part of the Jewish community, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community, of the tzibor, of the public, whether that be this congregation, whether that be the Seattle Jewish community, whether that be the Jewish people, whether that be the people who lay claim to the land of our ancestors. For 70 years, Temple Beth Am has been a progressive Jewish voice in Seattle, and we're so grateful to welcome all of you here. And we do so as a community that has an Israel engagement team and a Palestinian human rights group. And we as a community stand firm in the belief of a two-state solution, even as we may disagree about the details, how to get there. And so we want to say thank you to all of our co-sponsors for this evening, particularly to the New Israel Fund, who has allowed us to have these two wonderful conversationalists engage in what I believe to be the most important conversation that we have in our day. And this week, our Torah portion talks about creating sacred space as we wrestle with the big questions of our lives. I want to thank our Seattle partners, Temple Beth Shalom, our Kavana Cooperative, Temple Hirsch Sinai, the Seattle Jewish Community Relations Committee, UW Hillel, J Connect, and of course, New Israel Fund. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight to hear this important conversation. And without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Hannah Barg, the Director of Outreach of the Western U.S. for the New Israel Fund.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to introduce myself very briefly and introduce the New Israel Fund in case you're new. My name's Hannah Barg. I'm the Director of Outreach for many places, Seattle being the most important one. And if you're new to NIF, basically the way that we describe NIF is it's the engine for progressive social change in Israel. Any nonprofit that you've heard of, any NGO on the ground that's working on some sort of social justice issue, we say that NIF was at the cradle, either with seed funding, with training, with capacity building. We were there. And I had the fortune of being in Israel for the first time in 2.5 years, just 2 weeks ago. I don't live in Seattle, so I'm on a crazy travel spree. And by far the most impactful day that I had there was in the Negev. We spent a day in Kibbutz Nirim. We met with Avi Dabush, who is a rabbi and who's the head of Rabbis for Human Rights. And he told us his October 7th story, and then also how he continues to do the work of getting Israelis and international activists to do protective presence. We then went and met with people at the Regional Council for Unrecognized Bedouin Villages, which was super inspiring just to see the achievements that they've accomplished. And I really left feeling like the Negev is this amazing place that I simply have not spent enough time in. And I'm so grateful that tonight you're going to hear from another amazing person from the Negev, Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha, and also Rabbi Rachel Nussbaum, the rabbi at Kavana Cooperative. So I'm going to pass it over to them so you can hear even more about this work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, to Beth Am for hosting. Thank you, Hannah, for setting us up well for this conversation. And welcome, everyone. So we've got the comfy chairs. We're in the living room. And for the first half of our time together, the two of us are going to have a living room conversation back and forth that's open. You're going to hear a lot less of my voice because if I do my job right, my job as moderator is simply to tee up the questions so that Yasmeen can tell her story and tell us about the incredible work that she has done. And then we're going to open up the floor for questions. So please do be thinking as we move through Yasmeen's presentation to us. If there are things that you really do have questions about, questions for her, you can start formulating those in your mind. I'm delighted to be here. Again, my name is Rachel Nussbaum. I'm the Rabbi of Kavana. And I want to introduce you to Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha, who is an internal medicine doctor currently completing a clinical fellowship in critical care in Boston at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, which is my birthplace. I didn't get to tell you that. True. And a fellowship at Harvard. Yasmeen formerly served as the Health Policy Director at the Task Force for Health Promotion and Equity in Arab Society at the Israeli Ministry of Health, leading major efforts and interventions to deal with health disparities between Jews and Arabs in Israel. So we're going to be hearing a lot about the intersection between Jews and Arabs in Israeli society and also thinking about Israelis and Palestinians together. She was named one of Israel's 50 most influential women by Globes magazine in 2023. She also serves on the board of the New Israel Fund, and we were talking, because Yasmeen is here in the United States for the year, she had told Daniel Sokach, who runs the New Israel Fund, that she was happy to be of use while she's on the ground in the United States, and look what they did to her. They made her get on a plane and fly over to Seattle and tell her story to us. So we're really, really delighted that you are here. And I think that the best way to kick it off would be for you to set the stage, if you're willing, by just telling us a little bit about your personal story. Like, who are you? Where did you grow up? Where do you come from? How do you identify yourself on a personal level before we get to the professional and the October 7th and all of the rest?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all of you for taking the time and actually coming here to hear my story. This is very moving to me, and I love the idea of like a living room, because when you ask where I come from, I want to say I come from kindness. I come from a Bedouin heritage, and what we do is hospitality. This is what we're known for. And I was born in a Bedouin town, to a Bedouin father, to a Bedouin family, and one of the core values in my family and in my house was that the door is always open, everyone is welcome, and one of the most important things in Bedouin tradition is that anyone who comes in your door is protected, no questions asked. And I think, fast forward, being a physician is also something that I embody, right? As a doctor, so everyone who comes in my door is protected, no questions asked. So I was born in a Bedouin town called Be'er Sheva. It's in the south, in the Negev area. But when I was 5 years old, we moved to Omer. My family decided to move to Omer. Omer is a small town, Jewish town, also in the Negev. And my father always used to say that the difference between the two towns, or maybe the distance, is maybe 5 minutes by car, but it's like driving through time. It's about 100 years difference in terms of like development and socioeconomic status. And in Israel, we actually grade the towns in terms of socioeconomic status. Be'er Sheva is grade 1, which is like the poorest and very underserved. And Omer is 10, which is the highest one, the most affluent. Even inside like the 10 class, it's one of the 3 most strongest towns. So just imagine like the difference between the two places. But the other thing is the idea of moving, or the reason why we moved, was because my parents wanted us to get a better education. The education system in the Arab towns are not as good as in the Jewish towns in Israel. Sadly, the education system in Israel is very much separated. We have 4 different education systems, basically. 1 for the Arab society, 3 for the Jewish society, and the 3 Jewish are also in a way segregated. There's one to the ultra-Orthodox, one for the religious Zionists, we'll call them, or like moderate Orthodox, and then one for the seculars. And they are budgeted differently also. So my parents really valued education, and they loved their community. They wanted to stay there, but they also knew that, you know, if you want to make it as a minority, you have to make sure that your kids get good education. And I lived among Jews my entire life, to the point where when I was a teenager, I couldn't stand when people would say that I'm Bedouin. Like, I was like, no, I'm not these people. This is not who I am. I am like, I wanted to be Jewish, you know, because you're a teenager, you just want to be part of your community of peers, right? And my identity was shaped through a journey of learning and reclaiming both my ethnic identity as a Bedouin, but also my national identity as a Palestinian and a Palestinian citizen of Israel. Because my mother is not a Bedouin. She comes from the Triangle area in the northern part of Israel, and she grew up really on the Green Line. And she was an 8-year-old child during the Six-Day War, and she had a lot of trauma from this war, because they, like the military, used their house as kind of like an outpost or a checkpoint, because it was the highest in the village, and you could see the Jordanian territories. But part of what she tried to do to deal with the trauma was, when she grew up, she said, I can't hate anyone who's like wearing uniform. That doesn't make any sense. Like, I live in Israel. So in order to deal with the trauma of her childhood was to actually teach Arabic to soldiers, which, when you think about this today, it's crazy. And she actually had pictures, and she showed it to us. And part of the idea of, you know, growing up in a different culture was to say, this is the future that we want. We want to live together without anyone needing to give up their own identity or history or narratives. And both my parents were very much political activists. They were the co-founders of the Coexistence Forum in the Negev. They were part of the struggle to recognize the unrecognized villages. So many of the Bedouin villages are not formally recognized by the government of Israel because of many political reasons. But that means that about 100,000 people in the south live without, you know, access to electricity, running water, bomb shelters, clinics. So I grew up in this household that believed first in serving your community in kindness, in bringing people in living together, but also not giving up on your values. I hope I answered your question.
Definitely answered, and it's really beautiful. You have an unusual family.
Oh, absolutely.
First of all,
Yeah.
and I love the kindness and the hospitality theme. And I think it's a little bit hard for us to wrap our heads around the kind of poverty that you're talking about in some of the Bedouin communities in the South. And part of this conversation is about, you know, it's like different categories of difference. Some within Israel's borders, Like you were an Israeli citizen growing up, and so we're talking about disparities within Israeli society. And then we also are going to continue the conversation and talk about Palestinians in other places and other pieces of identity in a moment. But starting from here, so fast forward, you went to school, you became a physician. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that you were doing as a doctor and bring us along in your story to October 7th, when I know that you were working in a hospital that was really in the center of the action. Yeah. And I imagine that none of us have heard exactly a doctor's perspective, and maybe some have, I don't know. I had not, prior to this, heard a doctor's perspective before talking with you about what happened on October 7th, and I think this is like a good time for me to pause and say, we're dealing with really hard things because they're really hard things to talk about in our world today. And I hope that folks can hang in there, and if it becomes too much and you need to step out, feel free. But also, I hope that we can have conversations about difficult things, and I think part of the difficulty is like hearing things that feel traumatic. You were talking about your family's trauma. I think October 7th, for many of us who are part of the Jewish community, also feels like our family's trauma. And also hearing hard things in the sense of trying to wrap our heads around a perspective that is an utterly different perspective than many of the ones that we may have heard previously. So with that, if you could just bring us along in your education, like what were you doing as a doctor, and tell us about your October 7th experience.
So I went to med school in Jerusalem, in the Hebrew University, which was a life-changing experience for me, not only because I studied medicine, but also Jerusalem is a powerful city. I think for me, it was the first time living in a big city, in a very diverse city. It was the first time that I got to, see with my own eyes East Jerusalem, and I had interacted with Palestinians who are not citizens. And I started learning their perspectives and their stories. And I also, it was, for me, the place where where my journey started on reclaiming my own heritage and culture. And I'll confess, I have a confession. Growing up in a Jewish town, I spoke Hebrew much, much better than Arabic. Honestly, even today, I speak with my siblings and with my father. We speak in Hebrew. Surprising, right? But when I was in Jerusalem, and I had patients from East Jerusalem or from the West Bank, and they expected me to translate and be their advocate and help them with, I needed to speak in Arabic. I had a very broken Arabic. And for many years I thought, this does not define me. I can communicate with, and people understand me. And I think at that time I learned that, language is not only communication, it's also culture and history. And even when you look only on the communication part, you bring people in, and you're also opening their hearts when you speak to them in their own language, in their own mother tongue. And the funny story is that I actually got back my Arabic from the ultra-Orthodox hospital of Shaare Tzedek. Because this is why I owe Judaism a lot. I worked there as a goy shel Shabbat. It's a thing. It's a thing in Israel. I kid you not. I worked there as a student. It's kind of like a thing that you do in like Friday and Saturday, and you push buttons basically. It's like you dial and you do all the things that are not pikuach nefesh, and this is how you help. Did
everybody get that concept? Maybe the Shabbos goy. It was the role, like doing the things on Shabbat that the Jewish employees didn't want to or could not halachically do.
Yes, okay. Exactly. But I worked with a lot of. I was lucky enough to work in the delivery room, and like all of my colleagues were women, so they actually helped me practice my Arabic, and now I'm fluent. It all got back to me. But fast forward, I understood deeply through med school and through my time in Jerusalem, but also because my parents always believed that, you get high education and you get educated, yes, to make it in life, but also to serve your own community. So I knew that I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to work with the Bedouin community, and I did my internship and residency in internal medicine in Soroka Medical Center. Soroka Medical Center is one of the biggest hospitals in Israel. It is in Be'er Sheva. It is the closest trauma center to the Gaza envelope, and this brings me to October 7th. So I started working in Soroka at 2015. On October 7th, I was already a senior doctor. I was on call that Saturday. I was waking up 6:30 with the alarms. And I knew that I had to go to the hospital. I was there 7 a.m., and I really didn't know what was happening because no one knew. And what I thought was, this is just more of the same. We in the South, we kind of we're used to it. We're used to hearing the alarms, and we know what to do. And it's like, okay, this is just one of these days. But then the stories started coming in from the patients, actually. And from patients in my department. So I went to the internal medicine department, and I had one patient who actually broke the news to me, and I thought she was hallucinating at the beginning because it didn't make any sense. But then when my director arrived, who is a religious Jew, on a Saturday, I was like, okay, this is a serious thing. And I went down to the emergency room. And I spent, I think, the next 16 hours in the emergency room in Soroka, treating everyone who came in. And we treated people who were running from the music festival, so all kids, basically, tourists who came from, who have, they don't know anything. They have nothing to do with this conflict, people coming from Spain and Portugal. And foreign workers from Thailand who were working in the kibbutzim and were hiding in the burning fields and came with severe burns. And we treated people from the towns nearby, what we call Red State Israel. Okay, people who are in Ofakim, Netivot, Sderot, who are more. Let's say Mizrahi right-wing Jews, and also, left-wing Ashkenazi Jews from the kibbutzim. Everyone was there, and tribes, hundreds of people from the Bedouin villages who came in, honestly, with the bodies of their children in their hands, who were directly hit by Hamas rockets. And many of them live in unrecognized villages, and they don't have bomb shelters, and they had severe, severe injuries. And not only that they don't have bomb shelters, but they're not covered by the Iron Dome, because if you live in an unrecognized villages, if you're not on the map, it doesn't matter that you are a person and you live in a place. The Iron Dome is based on a map. Right, so if it is considered unpopulated area. So it's a sea of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, and soldiers who came injured from battle. And I remember after working for hours in treating these people, and I was on the area where the easy patients were, the patients you could actually talk to, and had minor injuries, even though some of them really had severe injuries. I looked up, and I looked at this sea of people and say, okay, they come from so many places and so many different walks of life, and we had really everything. And when you look at the team, right, the staff, the nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, they were also coming from different places, right? We had many of my friends were called to reserve duty in the morning. This was our reserve duty for when I was on call. I had to be there that day, but so many people just heard the news and just rushed to the hospital. There were settlers, secular Jews, and Bedouins. Everyone was there. And I learned two things on that day. My biggest aha moment was afternoon when I just looked around and I said, okay, this is not a conflict between Jews and Arabs. We have Jews and Arabs here. This is not a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. This is a conflict between people who believe that violence is the solution, it's the way to solve problems, versus the people who believe in saving lives and in humanity and in compassion and in helping others. And there's a side that believes that it is okay to kill people for a higher purpose, and a side that believes that every life is sacred. And I feel even strongly about this today, 2 years after the war, because I think that we're still there. Everyone who believes that all life is sacred and we're all equal and we all deserve human rights and freedom and justice is on my camp. And everyone who says something different, like it is okay to kill or it is okay to bomb a hospital because 1, 2, 3, not necessarily on my camp. And we keep that in our minds every day. And also, the second thing that I learned that day is the importance of community and the importance of civil society. And the reason I say that is not only because I'm on the board of NIF, but also because it was real. So you need to understand that on October 7th, all systems collapsed. Everything. We didn't have any rescue from formal authorities. We didn't have welfare systems. Nothing works. I treated a patient at about 5 p.m. that day who was severely injured, and he was screaming not because of pain. He was screaming because he was waiting for 8 hours until someone could come and rescue him, because really no one was there. And I was working in the Ministry of Health that day. At the time, you said I was a health policy director in a group that was the goal was to help with health promotion in the Arab society. So the mission was healthcare for the Arab society. And when we had our crisis in the Bedouin community, in my own community, and I texted my team in the Ministry of Health, I couldn't get any support, nothing, no funds, no one even came to visit because they were so shocked. They didn't really know what to do. But as opposed to this, in a matter of hours, on October 7th, a group of nonprofits who, I love all of them, honestly, who've been working in the Negev for decades, just started a situation room and said, these are our people, these are our neighbors, we got this, and started a situation room to bring, basic things like food, medications, diapers, to the Bedouin community, because all roads were blocked. They already suffer from lack of access to care, medications, and food, and we knew that this is going to be a crisis. Later on, we brought bomb shelters to these communities, and I am proud to say that Miki Gitzin, who's the executive director of NIF and a dear friend of mine, he was the first person who actually came and visit 2 days later, and the reason it took him 2 days was because on the first day he was in the Dead Sea with the evacuees, and NIF was actually the organization that paid for the hotels for the evacuees because the government could not do it. And NIF grantees like Physicians for Human Rights, Israel, came to the Dead Sea to give immediate, urgent medical treatment to everyone who were, running away and didn't end up in the hospital, or people who needed, immediate trauma care, mental health care. They were the volunteers from Physicians for Human Rights, and they were both Jews and Arabs who went there. And I can talk on and on about this, but I really think today, I thank God, and I think, I feel I needed to be there to understand and be grateful for having these friends and having these people in my life who were there in my deepest moment of crisis. Because I know it was a watershed moment for everyone. It's like such a traumatic day for everyone globally, right? But you need to understand that for us, for people who live in the Negev, it is so personal. So personal. I lost colleagues because they were on that day in the clinic in Be'er, right? And they work in Soroka. All of my friends, my colleagues, live in the kibbutzim. Many of the activists live in the kibbutzim. Vivian Silver, I don't know if you know her, like a very famous peace activist who was a teacher of mine and a mentor of mine for 5 years, was killed on October 7th. And it's devastating. It really is devastating. So it's very, very personal. And you do get to know your friends and your family in the moment of crisis. So I'm very, very grateful. I've never been more proud of being in anything as much as I'm proud of being part of NIF today.
Wow. Yeah. I think people are incredibly grateful to hear you tell this story, like I said, from a different angle than we've heard it. And I want to go back to these last 2 points that you made, because one of the questions that I have, on the very helpful piece of paper here, which we'll now ignore, is really about what lessons you want us, and also what lessons you think there are for Americans right now to take away from what's happening. But I think you've already said 2 of them in those realizations that you had. The first being that it's not about Jews versus Arabs or Israelis versus Palestinians, but people who believe in violence or versus people who believe that every human life is sacred. That feels like such a stark divide. And over these last 2 years in the American Jewish community, as a rabbi, one of the things that I have felt is this wedge driving towards extremes and driving every person to say, well, which one are you? Are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian? Do you care about this or do you care about that? And this is a complete reframe that I think is a very helpful reframe for many of us, which is actually the person that I am is someone who believes in these values. Here they are, let me articulate them. So that's the first gift that I think you're giving us tonight in this talk, is really a reframe that it's not an Israeli versus Palestinian conflict, but actually a conflict about what values we hold most precious and most dear, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then this second piece about civil society, the vacuum of government was filled by nonprofit organizations that were there. We're not going to go into this tonight, but part of the reason that civil society was as strong as it was because long before October 7th, there had been a whole group of lots of orgs, many of them NIF funded orgs and sponsored orgs, who were already working on democracy in Israel and out protesting every Saturday night. There was a mechanism for civil society such that it was very quick to flip from now we're organizing for these pro-democracy, anti-court change, policy, into action. How do we get hotel rooms? How do we get people mobilized? How do we get the supplies that we need? And I think that's interesting for us too, at a time where, there are real questions around government and civil society and the role of both. So thank you for bringing us these topics that I think are so super helpful. I want to pivot us for a moment to a different topic that I think has been under the surface of a lot of what you're saying, but is worth calling out, which is about Jewish and democratic. So this is the hard stuff. We get to the thorny issues here, but I think it would not be thought-provoking and interesting to talk to you if we didn't get to the hard stuff. So excuse me, but we're going there. Jewish and democratic. Like, for American Jews, this is how we've been thinking about the ideal of Israel. It's like, this is the state that we believe in because we're Jews and we need a Jewish state, and this is the state that we believe in because we care about democracy. But I think for many of us who are hearing now the perspective of an Israeli who grew up in Israeli society, as you said, with Hebrew as your dominant language, the one that you spoke the best, and you grew up with Jewish friends, and you wanted to fit into that and everything. Also, there are times where there's a rub between the Jewish and the democratic pieces of those values. And I'm wondering if we can benefit from your experience growing up as a minority, a member of a minority community in Israel, to hear a little bit about what does it feel like to hear those words Jewish and democratic together, and what message do you want us to take away about how those live together or in tension? How do we think about that?
Thank you for this question. I believe I'm not going to surprise you when I say there's a built-in tension when you say Jewish and democratic. And I think the question, at least for me, is that when I talk about this with people, is that what do you mean when you say Jewish state? And also, what do you mean when you say a democratic state, right? Because there's a spectrum. And this tension has been there from the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and has been ignored for almost 80 years. And I'm a physician, so I'm going to use a medical metaphor, right? And it's like, someone who's a diabetic and basically ignores it and comes to the hospital with a heart attack, surprise, surprise. And now this is a wake-up call, right? The question is, do you now go back to your behaviors and think, okay, should I, now that the heart attack is gone, I went to the cath lab, whatever, I'm going to go back to my previous life, or do I change my my lifestyle? And I do think that October 7th is a wake-up call. And this is not to digress. I will definitely answer your question, but I do think that this is a time to actually talk about the tensions. And I think the question is, and we saw it during I'll start with the democratic part because I think it's easier a little bit to me. During the demonstrations against the judicial coup, people started to talk about what does it mean? What does democracy mean? And for many, many, many years, people would thought that democracy is free elections, right? If elections are free and people are free to elect and be elected, then okay, we have a democracy. That's great. But then you learn that not really. Like, democracy requires a strong Supreme Court and a strong judicial system, and it requires a freedom of speech and academic freedom and freedom of movement and equality, right? When you think of it, the equality part that is in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel is not really there in the Israeli life when we think of democracy. It was really taking a hit with the nation-state bill in 2018, saying that, and this is going back to the tension of Jewish and democratic, right? So, saying there's one type of people who is kind of like in upper class or has more privileges than the other citizens, right? So is that democratic? It's a law that passed in a very democratic way, but is this democracy when we say that one type of one population has more rights than the other? Under the statement of this is a Jewish state, and I've not even started to talk about the West Bank, right, and Gaza, and How do we deal with the control over people who are stateless and don't have any rights to vote and to elect and be elected? So this is democracy. Like, do we live in democracy? And then the question of like a Jewish state. What does it mean to have a Jewish state? Here I want to tell you a personal story. When I was when I did my internship, I went to Poland with a delegation of medical students, doctors, and the idea was to go to the death camps, and the concentration camps for 10 days and just be there, absorb, learn. I was the only person who was non-Jewish. I didn't do it when I was in high school because I felt like, and I still do, I feel like 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't do it. It's not the right time. And I came back, and I honestly understand the need to have a homeland. I understand where it comes from. I was there, and I remember how shocking it was to me to be in Treblinka and see that the bathtub of the chief commander of the concentration camp was heated from the gas chambers. It's horrifying. And honestly, my friends asked me, why did you come? And I said, what do you mean? Like, this is universal history. Like, it's not only for Jews to see. We all should be there and learn, and never again is never again to anyone. So I do understand the deep fear and trauma and need to have a homeland for the Jewish people. Does that mean that we need to do it to do it in like? I'm trying to say it in like a very, very polite way because I really don't want to be offensive, and I if the Prime Minister of Israel won't be a Jew, will that make it not a homeland of the Jewish people? Question, I don't know. If there isn't a Jewish majority in Israel, will that make it not a homeland for the Jewish people? I don't know. That's a question. But I say it specifically because I think these are premises, right? It's not like it was never proven. But I also want to say another thing, is that there's a difference between saying, so a Jewish state means that there's no public transportation on a Saturday, right? Which is not beneficial to Jews themselves. But a homeland for the Jewish people means this is a place that is safe for Jews, right? And I want to say, as a Palestinian, I believe that this is what we should have, but we also should have a homeland for the Palestinian people. And it's not one at the expense of the other. It's actually, I would say, thank you. I want to say, we can't have one without the other. Honestly, I do think that the security and safety of both Jews and Palestinians of this land is connected and intertwined, and we can't have one without the other. And what we saw on October 7th is exactly that. You can't have one people who is safe and secure and the other is not. Just both are going to be unsafe. And the last thing that I will say is that we believe that separation is the answer. History shows us that that's not true, actually. That when we separate people, when we distance them from each other, it actually brings more violence. And we can have a place which is a homeland of both nations, and it can be two states, it can be one state, it can be a confederation. Honestly, I think this, by that time, it will be a technicality. We need to agree on the facts of everyone should have the same rights. We're all equal. We're all free we all live in a democracy, or maybe democracies, but we all have the right for self-determination, and we all have the right to defend ourselves, right? And the right to be free. And I think it's time, the tension between Jewish and democratic, honestly, is a Jewish debate that should happen. Like, I can give my perspective, but honestly, it is a Jewish discussion. Because the question is, like, what does it mean to have a Jewish state? And how does it sit together with a democracy?
Beautiful, profound. You're putting a lot of work back on us, which I appreciate very much. And I agree with you, actually, that those should be the conversations that we're having as a Jewish community around what does that mean. Does Jewish mean Jewish supremacist, which I think the current government in Israel is building towards more and more every day, and by allowing the violence that's happening right now in the West Bank to continue. We're seeing a pattern that is a terrifying pattern, and not one that feels like an expression of my Judaism. Or does Jewish, as a label there, mean upholding a certain set of Jewish values, like the ones that say that every human being is created in God's image, and therefore promoting equality is actually part of what Jewish could mean. So these are our conversations to continue. I want to give other people a chance to come into the living room, as it were, and ask some questions as well. We have the next 25 minutes or so carved out now for us to be able to open it up and hear what questions are in the room for Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha.
And I will just say my goal here is also to create a deeper community, so please share your name.
Hi, thank you. My name is Esther. I really want to thank you for your comments and your wisdom. You made a comment around how Jewish and democratic needs to be a Jewish discussion, and I very much agree. I was wondering very much what you see as a role for American Jews or non-Israeli Jews in the fight for a true democratic society in all of Palestine. Thank you.
So just to make sure that I understood, you're asking, like, what is the role of American Jews in this discussion, or?
What role can we play in promoting peace and equality?
Yeah. So you already play a very significant role, because Israelis and Israeli Jews do constantly look at what happens in the U.S. And specifically at the Jewish communities in the U.S. Every day, really on a daily basis, the Israeli media is monitoring what is going on, like in the American Jewish community, and you would get like papers about we're losing the young people in like the Republican Party and on the Democrat Party, but I'm going to leave that aside. I want to say that so I love telling stories, so I'm going to tell you another story. But when I started my first nonprofit, I was, I think, 26, and I did a fundraising in Boston, and I met this donor, and I told him about my nonprofit that is like dealing with preventing genetic diseases in the Bedouin community. And we spent like an hour, and he was really nice, and by the end he said, like, honestly, this is a niche, I don't care about this, but I'm still gonna give you the money. And the reason for that is because I know how it feels like to be the only person in the room who cares about my community. Because there are so many places where I sit on a board, and I'm the only Jewish person, and I'm the only one who physically understand how anti-Semitism looks like, right? Because I just know in my body what it means to be a minority. And I honestly feel the safest when I'm among you guys. Really, I feel like in a way American Jews understand what it means to live in a democracy that also looks down at them, if that makes sense, and like kind of like saying, of course you're equal, but also you're dangerous. And I think what I would like you to know is, and that's part of, like, I would say the rift with Israeli Jews, is that Israeli Jews live a majority mentality, and they don't understand these feelings, but we do. We Palestinian citizens of Israel, we do. And I would love to have more partnership with you guys, because I think you do understand our experiences, and we understand yours. And I think and eventually democracies are, they're measured by how they treat the weakest, right? And honestly, I'm not the weakest, right? But I know that I was blessed to be here with you, and I can actually speak up and give voice to people who can't be here, and I think you can do the same. And you can also remind people of who they are, right? So I think that in the past 2 years, part of the polarization is because people forget their values. And people think, we talked about this, people think that being pro-Israeli is being anti-Palestinian, or like pro-Palestinian doesn't mean it means that you're anti-Israeli. No. Being pro-Israeli is being pro-Palestinian. Being pro-Palestinian is being pro-Israeli. And you came in, and the pasuk on the door is Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. These are Jewish values, right?
Could you just translate that?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's love thy neighbor, right? Love thy neighbor is a Jewish value.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. That's a better translation. So honestly, I want you to go back to your, like, remind yourself of your own values, and then don't be ashamed of them. And I may, like, one more thing I want to say about this that I learned from, like, April of 2024. There was starting to come, like, we started to see, like, these terrible stories from Gaza about people, hungry, and really the terrible destruction. And one of the things that we did in NIF, and I am happy to say it was not my initiative or any of the Palestinian board members, but actually one of the staff members who is a religious Jew said, I cannot sleep at night knowing that we are in charge of what's going on in Gaza, and we have to do something about this. And we were saying, these are our values. We believe in human rights, and we believe that people should have shelter and they should have food. And if we're going to do that and going to go out with campaign to fundraise for Gaza, and people are going to leave us in terms of, like, their donors, well, it is what it is. But you know what? Once we were true about our values and said, this is who we are, we also reminded people who they are. And actually, we raised $3 million and counting, and we brought in also, like, non-Jewish donors. So I think the tent is big, but you need to be brave enough to remind yourself who you are, right? That's the most important thing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Mowat. I live in Bellevue and go to Congregation Beth Shalom. So I wanted to get to the question of what I think of as, maybe a way to put it, is trust, and also religious zealotry. Because what I see, I absolutely love the idea of a two states of some type. But I see the real problem is what you brought up at the beginning, which is there are people who believe that violence is the way forward, and there's people who believe that all lives are equal. And if you've got these zealots, I look at the people who were killed on October 7th, who were in these kibbutzim, who were trying to help Gazans. And it's so heart-wrenching, and I look at that and I'm like, how do you go forward from that?
So these people are still helping Gazans, and they're still helping Palestinians, and this is why this is how I go forward, because I feel like, we can't give in because the violent people are saying this is the way forward. No, they are the minority, to be honest, and if we are not going to do anything, then they are definitely going to win. And I think that's also why we saw this increase in populism and autocracy in Israel, because in a way, for many years, at least the strong left in Israel was saying okay, I don't need to deal with democratic values, and if the education system is not the best, then I'll pay to I'll get private tutoring to my kids and stuff like that. So, and we kind of gave up on this camp, on the political camp. And I think we're learning from these mistakes and correcting them to the point where now, at least I can tell you that in NIF, we understand that we have to invest in democratic teaching, in education, in policies, in messaging to people to say that the only thing that will bring safety is peace. And Hannah here, that spoke before, I'm going to use your story. She was in Israel a few weeks ago, and she met Yaela. Yaela is a friend of mine. She's the CEO of the Council for Unrecognized Villages, and she lives in Kibbutz Kisufim, who is in the Gaza envelope, and she was also hiding from Hamas militants at her home. And she continues to work with Bedouins and with Palestinians. And Hannah asked her, how did you do it? How do you do it after you have Hamas people in your home? And many people shifted to the right because of that. And she said, I know that many people have this response, but I had the opposite response because she said, I was sitting in my bomb shelter thinking, if they had listened to me 20 years ago, people would not be here in my home trying to kill me. And I think this is it, right? We have to change our minds and understand that if we want to have safety for everyone, we have to have a peace agreement, a sustainable peace agreement. And it's not unheard of. Israel has peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan. And if you would ask in 1974 any Israeli if they would have peace agreements with a peace agreement with Egypt a year after the Yom Kippur War, they would tell you absolutely not. All the polls said no, absolutely not. And 5 years later, we have the most stable peace agreement that Israel had, and the person who signed it was Menachem Begin. Right? The first right-wing prime minister of Israel. So I really think it's not a right or left thing. It's whether you believe that your people deserve to be safe.
Hi, my name is Brooke Broad, and I'm part of Kavana. And my question is a little bit about I want to more perspective maybe from somebody who lives in Israel around kind of the bubbles that exist. And I think some things that I have heard from both Israelis and Palestinian Israelis is, there's maybe a price to pay for the idea of normalization and that they can talk to each other, and that there's a lot of forces there trying to keep people in their own little bubbles and camps. And I'm wondering, what do you see of that, or is it you're making a face like maybe that's not true at all? But
in Israel or Palestine, or
in Israel.
So when you say normalization, what do you mean? Because I know this term about for the Palestinians.
I think the idea that if you can talk to somebody from the other side or the other camp, you're normalizing their acts of violence, or you're normalizing their point of view, and so you can't talk to them at all, and that there's a lot of, forces trying to keep people apart and in bubbles. And I'm wondering, where do you see that happening, or where do you see that being combated?
Yeah, okay. Very, very good question. So the reason I was asking about, because the idea comes basically from the Palestinian this community, non-citizens, and it is still like a big deal. Because Palestinians would say, many of them, or like a lot of the criticism of, working with Israelis is you're not normalizing the occupation, and it's a problem. So you do see some of it now in Israel, but I think as you've seen the depolarization in the U.S., the same is happening in Israel. And in Israel, it's even in a way it's worse because we really have a bad government at the moment who arrests people on a daily basis because they are, because they they're saying they're just against the government basically. So these are political arrests. So it becomes very challenging. I still think that the vast majority are willing to speak to. I actually think our problem is different, because I mean that you would hear many people from like the mainstream left saying like, how can we broaden the tent? How can we bring right-wing people in? I actually think we need to. What happens is that you give up your values. And you compromise on critical things to bring people in, which is obviously it is important to bring people in, but not at the price of your values. And if it means that, you need to say, now we have a debate about death penalty, right? And you need to think, is this okay, yes or no, to kill people just because on the right people are saying, we want revenge? No. Really, no. There's another way to create dialogue that is value-based, and I do think that we need to keep our values. And a beautiful example that I'll give, which is another NIF grantee, is the Faithful Left, a small emuni. They also have branches in the U.S., and I really recommend that you Google them. But these are people from the who grew up in like the deep settlement movement, right wing, young people, who one day looked around and said, this is not Jewish, and I'm not doing this anymore. And they started their own organization that uses the biblical scripts, and they have teachings, and they have a publishing company, and they publish like booklets with some sermons that they spread to their friends in the right wing and soldiers to try and like bring back, more moral ideas to the battlefield and to other places. And they are doing phenomenal work on like how to bring people together, but also like not giving up on their ideology and their values. And they do amazing protective presence, by the way. They do their Shabbat dinners and days with the Palestinians. And the Smol Emuni, and in English it's the Faithful Left, but I actually think even in English they call themselves Smol Emuni.
I think there was just a Haaretz article in English about them last week.
Yes.
If anybody wants to look it
up. Right.
Yeah.
So, but this is a type of organization that says, I'm going to bring people in because of what I believe, and not because I'm going to give up on what I believe just so people will feel more comfortable. And I think that's what we should do.
Okay, another question?
Sure. Okay. Good evening. My name's Sophie Asher. I'm from this synagogue and just really pleased that we are having this. Since we're in the living room together, this is actually more of a comment, but I feel like this is a place to share it. It's incredibly frustrating, this particular point you've made, and we're going back a little bit about, it seems so obvious to many people that the more peace and kindness and safety you bring to people, the more violence will go down. And I think of three particular examples of that. One is Germany after World War II. The second is Japan after World War II, when we are rebuilding, and those countries have obviously prospered and been paragons of peace and leadership since those times. And then in the work I've done, and I do criminal justice work, where it is so, and I don't mean to simplify these situations, but it seems like there's analogies here, where the more you take away barriers to people who have left jail, who have left prison, restore their voting rights, ensure that they have food, safety, shelter, social services, the more peaceful they are, the more helpful they are in society. And it's just painful to see, it seems, the exact opposite approach being taken in so many ways. So no question, but I just, I felt like I needed to say that.
I appreciate the comment, and we'll add a question to it. Maybe that's a kind of just tag teaming right off of that, which is, what is it that you would like to see happen next? And we've talked about the economic disparities within Israel, and we've also talked about the situation in the West Bank, for example, where you have a large number of Palestinians who are not citizens and who don't have rights. Like, what would the vision look like if you got to paint the picture of what some next step might look like? Less in terms of the political entity, but more in terms of the values and the vision. Can you articulate that for us?
Yeah, I want us to go back to basics, which is equality, freedom, justice, and saying that we should have consensus about this. And the reason why we argue about two-state, one-state confederation is because it's easier to talk about the technicalities than to talk about how equality looks like, and how freedom looks like, and how justice looks like. But these are the most important things. And the way I see the future, and I want to say, I think and maybe go back to the question about like where do I find hope? Think about how polarizing the past two years have been. Now imagine a group of Jews and Palestinians working together towards a shared goal, and it can be treating asylum seekers, it can be bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza, it can be thinking about new political solutions. And all these groups exist, and they became stronger and bigger after October 7th. So, and these are, and I can name a few. So, Land for All is a very good example. This is a political movement that actually brings to the table the idea of a confederation of basically two states, one homeland, two independent states, but with open bordered, shared institutions. And the reason I mention them is because they've been around for more than a decade, but they built their board of directors after October 7th. And the board of directors is 50% Jewish Israelis and 50% Palestinians, and most of the Palestinians are not citizens. So people from, most of them are from the West Bank, but some of them are like Palestinian diaspora from Gaza. And they did it on the first, I want to say, first week or 2 weeks after October 7th. And they are growing. They're growing in Israel, they're growing globally, because they are the people, they say, if this is the money time, this is it. So I actually, the way I see the future is this, is like the people who are actually able to solve things amongst themselves during this crazy time of the 2 years of war, they should be leading us in the future. And I really hope that we will see more and more and more people joining from a place of, first, they want their own safety and they want their own kids' safety, but also because they believe in equality, freedom, and justice. And this will be the basis of our soon to come, hopefully, a peace agreement.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm imagining equality and freedom and justice kind of bubbling up because there's not this leadership at the top creating them. So again, we have another example of a government vacuum. And here's where civil society and power of people create something in a groundswell kind of a way.
Right, but
It's a
when you
beautiful
think
vision.
exactly, and when you think of social change, I always give like examples from the U.S. Right, social change comes bottom up. When you think of LGBTQ rights, when you think of the civil rights movement, right, it took decades to get to the Civil Rights Act, but it was because civil society did the work for decades. And this is exactly what we're trying to do. And I think what I'm trying to say is that these things are a process, and we have to give it time, but we also have to work on it all the time.
Amen, amen. Another question.
Hi, I'm Gwyneth. My question is, well, first of all, thank you for those 16 hours. And thank you for all of the days and months since that time, like just from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
And all of ours, I think. So my question is this, and we were talking a lot in ideals about what can happen if all the reasonable, nonviolent people in the world get together, right? And create this one state or two state harmony. And my question is, once we do all that work, everything is good, we have still hundreds of millions of jihadists with one mission that transcends Israel in time and space, across the borders of every continent, and far before 1967, and far before 1947. And then where does Israel go then?
How do you know there are hundreds of millions?
A lot.
I actually don't think there's so many. So here's the thing. I think they're very loud. And I think the current Israeli regime is benefiting from them being loud, because it's easy to this is how you control people, because you make them afraid from the unknown. But I honestly, and I have dear friends in Gaza, in the West Bank, in other places, in the Gulf. I don't know any jihadist, but that does not mean that they don't exist. But I do think that I think we the fear is how you control people, right? And it's not that I'm saying Israel should not have an army, right? And shouldn't have a way to defend itself in case something happens. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying I am not willing to let fear control my life, and I am not willing to let anyone tell me that there is like this evil behind the wall that you shouldn't look through because it's just like this. There's this terrible thing. I want to reach out. I want to get to know these people. I want to know what they think of, and I want to tell you that on the other side, like the Palestinians, they say the same thing. They say Israelis want to wipe us out of this country. They don't want us here. They want to annihilate us, to destroy us, right? So me being on both sides, I can tell you, I think both sides are wrong. No one wants anyone gone, right? Everyone wants their own safety. But this is why I'm trying to, I invite you to question, because one crazy person having a video on TikTok saying, I want Israel destroyed, does not mean that the entire world wants it destroyed. And I will tell you that Palestinians that I meet say, it is a fact. There's the question of whether Israel should exist or not, it's not a question. It exists. And that's it. And no one is going anywhere.
So I applaud.
Thank you.
Those who want to applaud, go for it. And
It's
maybe
fine.
we can all take a deep breath in and out, because as Rabbi Nussbaum shared, we're sharing some uncomfortable truths. So I want to say thank you to everyone. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and then Rabbi Nussbaum. So we'll do 1 and 2, and then we'll see what how much strength we have. And again, to the question askers, please share your name. And if you want to connect to an institution in Seattle, fantastic.
Thank you. My name's Elizabeth Krakow. I'm a Merkaz member. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and your very thoughtful perspective. What would you say to young people who are faced with mandatory military service? You mentioned that if Israel has a right to exist, it needs an army. But at the same time, I think a lot of people, both outside and in Israel, are very uncomfortable with the way large segments of the IDF are conducting the offensive in Gaza and the way they conduct themselves in the West Bank. I come from Montreal, and many of my college teachers were actually draft dodgers. So it seemed growing up that it was so natural that if there was a war that seemed unjustified, one would refuse to serve. But that doesn't seem to be the case in Israel. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you.
Difficult question. Yes. I don't believe in mandatory service, is what I have to say. I think I've seen with my own eyes what mandatory service does to a society. Because so here's a question to you guys, okay? Let's say that you're policymakers and you need to create a military that is based on mandatory service. And you need to make 18-year-olds excited about going to battle. You know the American 18-year-olds, right? How do you make them excited to go to battle? The education system in Israel is designed to make 18-year-olds be excited to go to battle. And that's all I'm going to say. And I think also it's like when you think of how Israeli society looks like today, and how we got to where we are, that's part of why.
Hi, I'm Kurt Cooper. I'm on a committee here. Earlier tonight, we were discussing the possibility of making a discussion about discussing difficult subjects. And I'm pretty sure you've been in that room maybe every other day. So what we're looking for, we don't want to necessarily talk about Israeli food or Jewish food, whatever. We want to talk about Nakba. We want to talk about October 7, 67, take your year. What are some practical ideas for where we could have a civil conversation and it doesn't result in Rabbi Ruth having to get involved into civil?
Why? She's very nice.
She's done that, actually. And anyway, yeah, just some thoughts. And when you run for Prime Minister of Israel, let us know. We'll all move there and vote for you.
Thank you.
And I'll just share that, we really, here at Temple Beth Am, we're so grateful that you're here because it's hard to have the nuanced, complex conversations that are about the messy middle and not about the extremes, which is a part of what I think I've been hearing this evening. So this is a wonderful way to help us figure out how to have this conversation, which to my mind is a sacred conversation. And I just want to say that Kurt is a member of Temple Beth Am.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I got the question, though.
Your tips for how to engage in conversations that are really hard, given your experience doing it now for lots of days.
I think the question is, who do you want to talk to and why? I'm gonna. So here's the thing, I'm a doctor, as you already know, in the way I approach these things, we actually have a framework. Like we're trained to have difficult conversations. And I'm a critical care doctor. I talk about death on a daily basis, and I give like grave diagnoses on a daily basis. So whenever I do that, I prepare myself. And one of the things that we do is that, and again, this is a framework. The first thing is that you need to have the right setting, right? You can't talk, like, I can't tell someone that their loved one is dying in the hall, right? So when you want to have a difficult conversation, here's a tip. Don't do it over Shabbat dinner. Not the right way to do it. But like, sometimes there are like educational opportunities. Like you got into a situation because, I don't know, you were with your kids driving to somewhere, or I don't know, or like sometimes you can just say, okay, we need to talk about something. Let's schedule an hour and talk about it and just have the right setting. And again, it depends on who you want to talk to and what you want to talk about. Second thing, and this is how I open these conversations, and I do it as, you know, in my profession as a doctor, but also when I do political conversations, I ask the person in front of me, what is your understanding of the situation? How do you see things? And I would say, and this is for me first because I want to know, because I really want to know what people think. And second, because I want to know where the gaps are. Because then I can give my perspective. And also by that time, I already learned what is important to the person who is in front of me. And I can use that to leverage. And it is important to say, I'm not there to convince. I think I had one teacher who told me that really listening is coming into a conversation with being open to the possibility that I am going to change my mind, right? Because if you go into a conversation when you're like, I'm going to convince them that they are wrong, this is not a conversation. It really is not. And you're definitely not listening. So that's another thing. It's like, meet people where they are. And then, like, after you've had this discussion of like, okay, you are going to tell me where you are and I'm going to tell you where I am, have empathy. Let emotions come out. Because these are difficult conversations are difficult because they're based on emotions, right? If we're going to talk about the weather, it's not difficult. When we need to be okay with letting emotions out, and we need to be like compassionate enough to say, I disagree with you, but like I get where you were coming from, and I'm sorry. And I really appreciated the fact that you said that you thanked me, even if we may not agree on things. So I do believe in that. And then the last thing is summarizing. And summarizing is saying like, okay, this is what I learned in this conversation. Or this is, you know what, you were able to move me. Because I thought this at the beginning, and now I think that. And it does change people. First, it changes you. You know, just being able to engage in really open conversations. And here's another thing to Google. We call it spikes. It's an actual framework on how to do difficult conversation. It's like a known medical model, and I highly recommend. Spikes. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to pull us back for one final question. No, we're going to pull back for one final question here. thank you, everybody, for sticking with this conversation. And to your last point about these challenging conversations, I hope that all of us actually feel like we walk away with this conversation having left an imprint in some way. And I think one of the best ways to think that over is like by actually trying to articulate for yourself or with somebody who's next to you as we leave something that we're taking away from this. So I challenge each of us to do that as we go. But I want to give you the last word. There's something so unique about the perspective that you bring as a physician, and I'm wondering what you have heard, what you are hearing, what's going on in the medical world, and maybe you could leave us with like a little something that you want us all to take away and to know, something that gives us hope or something that we could do to help. Like, what should we know from the medical perspective about what's happening in this moment?
So from a medical perspective, I want to say I actually have a lot of, this is where I'm moving a little bit uncomfortably in the chair, because I was a little bit disillusioned in the past 2 years. I expected I had high expectations from doctors, and I got a lot of disappointment. Because I truly believe that doctors are the people who will be like the first ones to say, yeah, every life is sacred, and we shouldn't bomb hospitals, we shouldn't kill paramedics, we shouldn't do all these things. This is like not something that we should do. And sadly, at least the main medical establishment in Israel was not able to say these things. However, there are groups of very, very stubborn healthcare workers who believe deeply in the oath that we took, to the point where like they are one of the most incredible people I know that are moving mountains to help I know one doctor who works in Shaare Tzedek in Jerusalem who really moved mountains to bring baby formulas into Gaza, and bring wheelchairs, and bring insulin. And these people are the most inspiring people I know. Because they really live up to the value of treating each other equally, right? And treating everyone equally. And they say, it doesn't matter that there are so many obstacles in the way, we're gonna figure it out, because that's what we do as physicians. So not many, but the few that we have are incredible. And one of them, and this is one of the things that gives me hope, actually started the demonstrations, with the silent demonstrations with the pictures of the kids who were killed in Gaza. And it started with like 5 women, and now there are thousands every week. They do it also in the US. And this is also a very good example on how social change and bottom up change happens, right? Because all you need is this crazy person to stand with a picture of a child, and then you have followers, and people come and come in, and they face really a lot of criticism, despite the fact that they are they read names of kids who were killed, and they read names not only of Palestinian kids but also Israeli kids, Syrian kids, Iranian kids who were killed, because these kids they're kids. They were never involved in this, and we should remind ourselves that everything we do is for the next generations, and it is our obligation to make it stop. And if it and I think coming from healthcare, I do want to end in a hopeful note. I did a study. It started before the war, and we continued it after the war, about joint healthcare initiatives between Jews and Palestinians, and we were able to show that these initiatives were actually helpful in building trust, because the good thing about healthcare, and the reason we looked at healthcare, is that we are trained at, delivering bad news. We are trained in building trust and building rapport with our patients. We're trained in how to deliver difficult conversations. So this is really a profession that is based on trust. So what about maybe we can leverage it to build trust between communities in conflict. And we looked into these initiatives, and we saw that there were 3 metrics that were important. Equality, so if the participants and the decision makers were equal in terms of numbers and also like power dynamics, you saw more, it was associated with more trust being built. And then the second was in how intense was the interaction, which is obvious. Like if you meet someone for 1 hour, it's nice, but if you work with someone for 4 years and you eat together, you sleep together, all the things, then obviously you can build trust. And then the third thing, which I find the most interesting, is intentionality. And we define intentionality as being explicit about wanting to build trust. And we saw that this was the strongest association. So when Jewish healthcare workers and Palestinian healthcare workers came together for a purpose of treating people, but they were intentional about building trust among each other, and also intentional about, we are going to talk about the difficult issues. This is where we saw like the most trust being built. And this is why I encourage you to talk about things that are important for you, to be explicit about what you want, and about building trust. And it's kind of like, I don't know how to translate it, but it's like nevuah shemagshima et atzma. It's like a prophecy that makes it happen. I don't know how would you translate? Self-fulfilling prophecy. Thank you. This is where my English fails me. So yeah, that's basically what it is. This is why I keep talking about peace, and people think that I'm a hippie who hugs trees.
Yasmeen, thank you. Toda, shukran.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
It is clear beyond words that you touched a lot of hearts tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming. I really genuinely want to thank you for the work that you do in the world. You are a healer in every way, and I can feel it in this conversation as there's so much repair that is really happening. We say in our Jewish tradition that this is holy work. One of our names for God that we talk about is Rofei kol basar umafli la'asot, that God has the capacity to heal all flesh and to do wonders, and you heal all flesh and do wonders, and we all have the ability to be part of this work. And this is the note that I want to end with. In addition to thanking, again, all of the co-sponsors for tonight, and thanking Rabbi Ruth Zlotnick for welcoming us into this space here at Temple Beth Am. And in addition to thanking you all for coming, it is also my honor to share that today is Giving Tuesday, And that is a campaign day where lots and lots of organizations are trying to raise funds to do the very good work that they do in the world. I received at least one, maybe more than one, email from NIF today asking for some of those funds. Perhaps you did too, but if you didn't, I know that Hannah, who's going to be in the back of the room, will be able to tell you how to go online and contribute. We really don't know what the future is going to look like here or in Israel right now. We're living at a time of incredible uncertainty. But from NIF's track record, we know that the New Israel Fund and all of its many grassroots organizational partners that it works with in that civic society that we talked about in Israel are working tirelessly to push back against the forces of extremism and to fight for a just, democratic, and peaceful Israel, the kind of Israel that is aligned with our deepest values. And before you leave, I really do encourage you, if you have not done so lately, to please go online and make a donation to NIF or speak to Hannah about how to do that. Thank you again, everyone, for coming tonight. Laila Tov.